I playfully mocked him for his receding hairline at a neighborhood party. Then this happened. I made a joke about my boyfriend's receding hairline, and he didn't think twice to deal with me. It was just a joke, but my boyfriend took it to heart. Everyone laughed at the joke, and I thought we were all having fun together, but I didn't know that that really hurt my boyfriend to the point of him breaking up with me. This is still like a dream to me right now. I really want to wake up from this nightmare because it isn't funny any longer. Hey Reditters, my name is Tina, and I am a 24-year-old hairstylist and also an accountant at a private company that can't be mentioned. I know you all would be wondering how I'm a hairstylist and also an accountant at the same time. Well, I'm an accountant by profession and a hairstylist by hobby. First of all, I was a hairstylist before I met my boyfriend James. James helped me to pick up my profession when we started dating. At that time, I had nothing. I was getting out of a heartbreak then. Pete and I have been together for 1 year and 6 months now. My boyfriend is 26 years old. Before I met Pete, I was in a relationship with my ex-boyfriend Josh. Josh broke up with me just like that. There was no reason for our separation. That really broke me very hard. For months I was heartbroken because of how Josh decided to put an end to our relationship. Josh and I were together for 2 years before he woke up one day to end the relationship. All my efforts in making the relationship work were all in vain. I couldn't take it at that time. I felt betrayed and my life was shattered. For months I couldn't do anything with myself. At some point I had to go for therapeutic sessions because it felt like I was losing my mind. I loved Josh so much. Guys, I don't really know how to express it, but Josh and I were so in love at that time. Breaking up with me without any valid reason was what broke me very hard. Josh knew how much I loved him, and I guess he used that to his advantage. Months after Josh and I broke up, I met Pete. Pete and I on a bus one morning. I can't really remember what happened between us that day, but we exchanged contacts and we started talking. It's really a long story, and I don't want to bore you all with it. Honestly, guys, I was really skeptical about exchanging contacts with Pete at that time, considering the fact that I was coming out of a relationship then. Our chats were so boring because I was not interested. It could take me days to reply to any of Pete's messages. That was how bad it was then. You all wouldn't blame me. I was trying to forget about my ex, which wasn't that easy. So guys, after a few weeks of chatting with Pete on the phone, he asked if we could see, which I kept on denying until after some months that I finally decided to grant his request. We met, hung out for some while, and that went on for a month. After that, Pete asked me out to be his girlfriend, which I bluntly refused. I didn't give him any valid reason. In fact, Pete didn't know that I was suffering from a heartbreak. I know you all would blame me for not letting the poor guy know about it. Yeah, I know. How I have treated him right from the beginning was bad, and I terribly regretted everything that happened. But it's not totally my fault after all. The poor guy was in love and would do anything to be with me. Maybe I took that a little bit extra. I refused Pete's proposal and he didn't bother trying to ask me further. He respected my decision at that time and he maintained his lane. After that day, both Pete and I went about our normal activities. The chats were off like I said earlier. But after turning him down, the chat became even worse. I felt lonely again at that time. Guys, just imagine someone checking up on you every day after they woke up. Like, that's the first thing they do before getting out of bed. Isn't that awesome? I don't know about you guys, but I felt the same way then. Most especially after being dumped by my ex-boyfriend. I missed the whole checking up, texts and calls, even though I wasn't fully invested in the conversation. I was used to that and I couldn't do without it. At that time, my hairstyle business wasn't moving pretty well for me. In fact, nothing was moving well for me. My bills were due, most especially my house bill. I had no money to take care of myself. My ex-boyfriend at that time was the one taking care of everything for me. Josh provided everything I needed and gave me monthly upkeep. After we broke up, he stopped giving me money or taking care of any of my bills. It wasn't really easy for me at the time. My business lagged behind because I didn't put in my full attention when Josh and I broke up. Instead of resuming work, I was wallowing in self-pity, crying over a spilled milk. I lost a lot of potential clients because I kept turning down any appointments I was booked for. I didn't know that I was losing a lot of money then. It was crazy, guys. I feel so stupid anytime I remember that. Even more stupid now for letting Josh's breakup take a whole lot on me. You guys needed to see me then. I lost weight over a mere breakup with someone that had no good intentions for me. I was so comfortable by how Josh treated me. that I literally forgot to save for the rainy days. Like they say, nothing good lasts forever. I should have had a backup, didn't it? I got so comfortable. Well, you wouldn't blame me. What do you expect after being with someone for 2 years? You would think you two would end up together, isn't it? Well, I thought so too. But guess what? That didn't happen. 2 years of my life got wasted then, and I had nothing to show up for it. I would have been better off with Pete if I had given him the full attention he needed. One of the major reasons that I didn't accept Pete's proposal was because he wasn't that physically attracted to me. In fact, Josh was more attractive than Pete in terms of facial looks and physique. I wouldn't lie, guys. Pete wasn't the type of man I wanted. Don't get me, he isn't as bad as you all are imagining right now. You know, everyone has their preferences in a man that wants to start up a relationship, if not family with. But Peter wasn't that type of guy for me. Yes, he has money, has a good job, and is doing well for himself. The only issue there was that Pete had a receding hairline which didn't sit well with me. I wanted someone that I could be proud of any time we stepped out. I didn't want to be embarrassed by any guy that I was in a relationship with. Considering how my ex-boyfriend was good-looking, I set up a standard on how the other guys I was going to be with would look, if not as Josh or more than how Josh was. Yes, Josh was pretty handsome, and I couldn't settle for less. That mindset clouded my thoughts that I couldn't see that there's more to a relationship than facial looks. In terms of character and intentionality, Pete was way better than Josh. Pete was very intentional about us. He did things for me with ease that Josh would not do and saw it as a big deal. Josh would never cook or do the dishes or even do his own laundry. But Pete did all of those things. Life with him was very easy. I hardly made any meals because Pete knew how to cook and didn't see the need of me stressing myself about it. Guys, I was given the princess treatment. Like I said earlier, the only problem I had was his hairline, which I wasn't too comfortable with. I know it all sounds like I'm a vain person, but it's just my preference. That was why I declined his proposal to be his girlfriend. Yes, I was healing from a heartbreak like I stated before, but that wasn't the main reason. So guys, when my bills were becoming too much and I had no money to take care of myself, I decided to give Pete a chance. At that time, I didn't love him that much. I missed being taken care of. That was why I agreed to be with Pete. Guys, please don't even blame me. That was the only option I had at that time. My house bill was due, and you all don't expect me to live on the street when I have an opportunity to have access to free food, watch TV, and be spent on. No, guys, I couldn't do that, most especially when I knew that Pete had everything I wanted. I went back to Pete. At some point, we didn't chat for a while because I was not interested, and so he gave me some space. I started up the conversation when I didn't know how to pay up my bills. I went back to him and told him that I was ready to be his girlfriend, even though it took me 2 months to accept his proposal. Pete at first felt reluctant to take me back after I rejected him and treated him like a crab. He told me that he wasn't interested any longer since it took me time to accept his proposal. After weeks of chasing after Pete, he accepted me because he had interest in me and was very much in love with me. I used that to my advantage even though I wasn't feeling the same way for him. Pete didn't know the reason why I suddenly accepted his proposal. If he had known, he wouldn't have taken me back. I was desperate at that time to get into a relationship, so guys, after Pete and I officially started dating, I moved into his house. It was my first time seeing what Pete's house looked like. All the times we met, it was at a restaurant or any interesting places. We didn't know each other's houses then. I was happy that Pete didn't know where I lived before I moved into his house. That would be disastrous, and I don't want to talk about that now. So guys, moving into Pete's house was one of the best things that has ever happened to me. He had a whole lot of free space and had everything that would make me really comfortable. At that time, I kept asking myself what took me so long to accept his proposal. Pete was living alone in a very beautiful house. I couldn't ask for more. That was what I needed at that time. After moving in, I didn't worry about paying any bills or fending for myself. My boyfriend took care of all of that for me. After some months of being together, I was able to get my life back. Everything went back to normal, and it felt like I was getting back on my own 2 feet. Of course I was. The breakup with Josh broke me into a million pieces which I can't even explain. Pete was what I needed at that time. I needed someone that would take care of me and foot my bills. That was all Pete was to me then. Anything other than that was just pretense. Romantically, physically, and otherwise, I wasn't attracted to Pete. Yes, you guys can say that I was there for his money from the beginning. I don't really care that much. But the truth is, at first I was, but not as time went on. It would be hard for you all to believe, but that's just the plain truth. I started off the relationship because I needed someone to take care of me, but along the line I started liking Pete when everything was beginning to go back to normal. We went out together, even though I wasn't too comfortable with Pete's receding hairline. Most of our outings were usually in the evenings. Guys, I know that sounds stupid, but that's just the truth. Crazy thing is, Pete's receding hairline wasn't that too bad. But for me it was. Throughout the time Pete and I were together, we have never spoken about his hairline because I felt like it was ridiculous to talk about something like that. I mean, even if we had, it wouldn't have changed anything. My boyfriend was happy with it. Well, I can't say for sure because I didn't bother asking him if he was. Maybe that was the mistake I made. Not all men in that type of situation are happy, though. Some tried to get rid of it by going for hair plants. Up till now, I'm still wondering if Pete had ever thought of that. I was too insensitive to have noticed about Pete's hairline, that was why I made fun of it. I mean, the first day that I mentioned his receding hairline was the day I got Pete so angry. What got him upset the most was the fact that I had to bring it up at a party. Not just a party with our neighbors. Guys, how can anyone be so stupid as that? Bringing him down in front of our neighbors was so foolish of me. It was then I knew that Pete had a problem anytime someone talks about his hairline. Guys, it was just a joke that was meant to be laughed at, but my darling boyfriend was furious about it. When I told the joke, everyone laughed at it as it should be. The only person that had a problem with it was Pete. I still can't understand why he fled up the way he did. I can't say if the joke was intentional. I didn't think twice about it before I said it. It wasn't like I wanted to bring him down in front of everyone. Do I regret it? Yes, a whole lot. I realized that I shouldn't have said it in the first place. Whether I meant it or not at that point, that doesn't matter now, because the deed has been done, and Pete's action after that wasn't funny to me as it is now. I regretted everything, and I wish there would be another neighborhood party like that again, where I can apologize to Pete and tell him how deeply sorry I am. I really messed things up. Guys, the most surprising thing was that Pete even planned on proposing to me to be his wife. If I hadn't made fun of my boyfriend's receding hairline, we would have been planning our wedding right now. Pete had always wanted to take things to the next level with me. He even went as far as making me pick up my profession. When I moved into Pete's house, I was a hairstylist like I said earlier. Though things were not moving really well for me, the business fluctuated and I hardly got any appointments with clients. Pete felt concerned about it. He didn't like the fact that I wasn't earning any money for myself. Yes, he provided everything I wanted, but he wanted me to work to earn mine so I could have some savings. And so guys, my boyfriend proposed that I work in a company. Since I had the qualifications to be an accountant, I just needed the right push. And my boyfriend was the right person to do that. Guys, I didn't stress myself to get the job. Pete made everything easy for me. At that time, Pete and I were just a year and 2 months of being together. So within a few days, I got an email from a company to work for them. I couldn't even be more grateful than that at that time. Within a few days, I started working at my new place of work. It felt so surreal because I knew what I went through to secure a good job after getting out of college. When the job wasn't forthcoming, I decided to venture into my hairstylist business. That's what I used to earn a living before it hit the rock when Josh and I broke up. I couldn't concentrate because I was too heartbroken. So guys, everything at that time went well, most especially at my place of work. The job wasn't so demanding and I got paid really well. Within a few months of working, I had some money saved up for myself. Pete never asked me for a penny from my monthly income. I was literally living my best life at that time. Just when I thought everything was perfectly falling into place, guess who decided to show up again? Yes, guys, it was my ex-boyfriend Josh. After abandoning me for a year and a few months, Josh decided to come back to my life. He reached out to me through my social media handle. Josh pleaded with me to forgive him for the heartbreak he had caused me, and he promised to make it up to me. I didn't know how to feel or react at that time. I was angry at him for breaking up with me without any valid reason. On the other hand, I was in love with him. I couldn't get over Josh, even though I tried everything I could to get over him. What do you guys expect? Josh was the second guy I had ever dated. At that time, I was very much in love with him, and I don't even know how to explain it then. Out of all the guys I have dated, Josh was the most handsome. Maybe I was a little bit obsessed with him. And so, when Josh came back and asked us to get back together, I knew I was in trouble. Even though I didn't like Pete that much, it wasn't my intention to cheat on him. Our relationship was going on well, and I tried to like Pete at that time. Guys, I wouldn't even lie, it wasn't working at all. To make matters worse for me at that time, Josh decided to show up. How could I have been able to get over it? 2 men were interested in me. The most silly thing was, I liked the one that dumped me for almost 2 years. I reconnected with Josh and we started chatting together. Even though he had wronged me at that time, I couldn't get over him. Josh and I chatted for a few weeks and met within those times. So guys, there was this party our neighbors invited Pete and I to. The party was done once every 2 months, and the few times the party was held, Pete and I couldn't attend, due to one reason or another. Of course, the neighbors were a bit upset considering the fact that Pete and I had been together for a year, but hadn't attended any of the parties together as a couple. They wanted to meet me, and so we made it a point of duty to attend. I had no expectations from the party. I just wanted to hang out with the neighbors and some friends. Yes, friends that weren't living in the neighborhood were also invited. Pete and I invited a few friends for the party. Guys, when I thought everything was going on well, my ex-boyfriend decided to break the news to me that he would also be attending the party. I was not happy with that because I didn't want my ex-boyfriend to see Pete. At some point, I decided to not go to the party, but Pete was more excited than I was. He couldn't wait to have me introduced to the neighbors for the first time. At that point, there was nothing that was going to stop my boyfriend from attending that party. I became so restless and anxious at the same time. On the other hand, my ex-boyfriend also wanted to see the guy that I had replaced him with. Josh was always full of himself. I didn't know what to do at that time, and I couldn't say I would not attend the party. So, on the day of the event, when my boyfriend and I were ready to leave the house to the venue, I gave Pete a face cap to wear so that it could cover up Pete's receding hairline, because I didn't want my ex-boyfriend to see what Pete's hairline looked like. Pete refused wearing the face cap because he was confused why I had given the cap to wear. I didn't tell him the reason and told him to put it on. My boyfriend refused and told me he didn't see the need to put on a face cap. I was a little bit mad at Pete but didn't make a fuss out of it. We went to the party like that. When we got to the venue, we met a lot of people. Pete and I met with a few friends and also some of his colleagues at work. While we were at that, my phone beeped. I checked my phone and saw that it was a text message from Josh. He saw my boyfriend and I walking into the party. He sent another text, and when I read it, I lost confidence in myself. Josh asked me through the text if Pete was the guy that I had replaced him with. He said he had expected better from me than the guy I ended up with. I read the text and ignored all of the messages. Josh kept texting me, and it was very annoying. At that point, I was angry that Pete didn't put on the face cap I had given him. I thought to myself that if Pete had listened to me, Josh wouldn't have made fun of me. Anyways, I didn't let that ruin my night. I made up my mind to ignore whatever messages Josh sent to me. A few minutes after Pete and I arrived, everyone came together to play a game. It was a ritual they did anytime they had something like that. The game was simple. Each of us at the party that were neighbors had partners, and we were made to say anything romantic about our partners. It was a fun game, and I really enjoyed listening to other neighbors talking about their partners. It got to our turn. Pete and I stood in front of everyone to talk. My boyfriend started off by officially introducing me as his girlfriend to the neighbors for the first time. Everyone cheered, and from the look on their faces, I could tell that they were happy to see me at that moment. My boyfriend continued by saying how happy he was to meet a beautiful lady like me and said a lot of nice things about me. Pete told everyone that I was the kind of woman he would want to settle down with because I was a nice and caring woman to him. At that moment, I was surprised, though, because I couldn't remember being any of that to Pete. After he was done, it was my turn to talk about my boyfriend. I started off by saying Pete was an intentional guy and told everyone how he provided everything that I needed and how he took very good care of me. Then I told everyone that Pete wasn't the kind of man I always wanted. He's nice and caring, but I wasn't physically attracted to him because of his receding hairline that I always felt embarrassed about any time we were out together. I said it in a joking way and everyone had a laugh. But Pete didn't find it funny at that moment. Just when I was about to continue what I was saying, turned to me and asked me what was the meaning of what I said. I told him that it was just a joke, but Pete got really upset and walked out of the gathering with anger. Everyone, including I, was surprised to see Pete walking out the way he did. At that moment, I ran after him to ask him why he was walking out on everybody at the party. While I ran after Pete, Josh also ran after us. I didn't understand why he ran after us at that moment. I didn't stop even though he kept calling my name. All I was interested at that point was to talk to Pete. I kept calling Pete to stop, but he didn't listen to me. After a few seconds, Pete stopped, turned around and asked me what the meaning of what I said to everyone at the party. Immediately, I responded by saying it was just a joke, nothing more than that. Pete wasn't having it at that moment. He asked me what kind of joke was that and why I had talked about him in that manner in front of everyone. I could feel how upset he was, and I knew at that point that I had overstepped my boundaries. Pete immediately asked me if that was the reason I had asked him to wear a face cap. At that point, I couldn't say anything to defend myself. I stuttered and mixed words together. When I couldn't say anything meaningful, Pete asked if that was how I feel about him, and that I never loved him from the beginning. While we were talking, Josh came over to where Pete and I were standing. He held my arm and asked me to follow him immediately. Josh asked why I was running after Pete and told me there was no point running after someone that I was not physically attracted to, and he laughed after that. Pete was surprised to see Josh holding my arm the way he did and asked me who Josh was to me and why he was interfering in our conversation. Josh responded by saying that he was my ex-boyfriend and introduced himself to Pete. Josh had the audacity to tell Pete that if not that we had a breakup, he wouldn't have been able to be with someone like me and that he should be lucky that he did. Josh added that he was the one taking care of my bills and provided everything that I needed when we were together and that I started dating Pete almost immediately when we had a breakup. To make matters worse, Josh told Pete that he was my rebound after the breakup. Pete looked at me for a few seconds and asked me if everything Josh had said was true, and asked if that was the reason I accepted his proposal after 2 months. I told Pete to ignore whatever Josh was saying because he could be drunk at that moment. Pete went ahead to ask me if that was the reason I ran to him because I didn't have anybody to sort out my bills after my ex-boyfriend and I broke up. Guys, I didn't know what to say. I stood there like a dumb fool. Everything my boyfriend was asking me at that moment was true. Pete couldn't believe everything that happened that night. He realized that our relationship was a lie from the beginning. He was disappointed in himself for not noticing it on time. Pete left the party angrily. At that moment, I was confused and didn't know what to do. I was also scared to go back home that night. I had to spend the night with one of my friends that was at the party. Pete was very furious at that time, and I didn't want to upset him further. The next day, I went to the house to plead with Pete to forgive me for making a joke about his hairline and not being true to him from the beginning. Guys, when I got home, I met Pete packing my things out. He told me that he was done with the relationship and didn't want to have anything to do with me any longer. My boyfriend even went to the extent of throwing my things out. The neighbors that cared to watch stood there looking at everything that was happening between Pete and I. Pete made it clear that he didn't want to see me around him. I was so embarrassed and at the same time heartbroken. I didn't know what to do or where to go at that moment. The only option that came to my mind was to call Josh. I called him and told him everything. Josh asked me to come over to his house because he didn't understand why I had to go back to Pete after what happened the previous night. Immediately I ended the call. I packed all my things that were littered outside and headed over to Josh's house. Pete and I broke up at that moment, and I wasn't happy the way it happened. Update. Hey Redditters, here's an update to the last post I made 7 months ago. Yeah, it's been a while. Guys, there's nothing really to talk about. None of the advice helped in changing Pete's mind. We were done that very day he asked me out of his house. You all would say, okay, I lost Pete, but what about Josh? Guys, Josh was the worst. Going back to Josh was just like a dog going back with what he had vomited. Getting back with your ex after 2 years of separation is a bad idea. Maybe it had worked for others, but it didn't work for me. A lot happened with Josh, and I terribly regretted going back to him. Guys, I thought moving over to Josh's house was a perfect idea. I thought that he still felt the same way for me, but I was mistaken. Guys, little did I know that Josh was just trying to use me because I had money. My ex-boyfriend was in a huge debt and didn't know how to pay it back. Moving into his house was a bad idea and the biggest mistake I had ever made. The few weeks I spent at Josh's house was hell. He emotionally blackmailed me into giving him money and footing the household bills. Anytime Josh wanted to collect some money from me, he would say he had some projects coming up and needed money to sort out a few things. If I eventually give him the money, he would use it to buy lots of unnecessary stuff. I also discovered that his rent was due and he had no money to pay. I was the one that footed the bill and other household bills that were pending. Doing all of that made me spend all the money I had before I moved into Josh's house. Should I even talk about the restocking of the groceries? Guys, everything was not properly in shape. At that time, I needed a roof over my head and all the comfortability I needed, and so I paid all the pending bills and had the groceries restocked. Josh promised to pay back once he was done with the project he was working on. At some point, I got tired and told Josh that I couldn't continue any longer, but Josh kept guilt-tripping me by saying he had spent a lot on me when we were dating and that I should use this as a way of paying him back for everything he had done for me. Of course, if anyone had been in my shoes at that moment would do exactly what I did. In fact, even more. Most especially when you are desperate. Josh knew that I had nowhere to go to or anybody to run to for help. That was why he kept blackmailing me. I kept on spending on Josh and also kept taking care of the household bills. Before I knew it all, my savings were finished and I became broke. I had no money and couldn't take care of myself. Another heartbreaking thing was that my job was finished. Yes, guys, just one morning I went to the office and my boss told me that they wouldn't be needing my services any longer. I didn't know what went wrong and what I did that could cost me my job. My boss also didn't tell me why he was relieving me of my services also. I was confused and kept thinking what could have gone wrong. At that moment, a thought came to my mind that Pete could be behind this because he was the one that got me the job in the first place. It made sense to me at that point that he was the one that did it. After leaving the office, I headed back home and waited till in the evening to pay Pete a visit because I was sure he wouldn't be at home that morning and would be at work. So guys, I paid Pete a visit the time I was sure that he was back from work. I confronted him about it and I was right at the end of the day. Pete was the one behind me losing my job. It was his way of getting back at me. I was so angry that he did that to me. The job was my only source of income, but Pete took it away from me. I left there and went back to tell Josh that I had no job anymore because Pete made them sack me from work. Josh told me that there was no point keeping me in his home if I didn't have a job and asked me who would be taking care of the household bills since I was jobless. Guys, I didn't expect to hear that from Josh. I was so upset that we even got into a heated argument. At that moment, Josh packed my things and threw them out. He told me he couldn't keep a liability at home and asked me to leave. I felt so used and stupid. I left Josh's house that day and he blocked my lines. I also did the same because I hate him right now. The past few months have been challenging for me. I couldn't believe that I spent all my savings on an ungrateful fool. Thinking about that right now actually makes me sick. I thought Josh and I would go back to the way we were when we started dating. The spark wasn't there any longer, and he reached out to me because he wanted to use me to pay off his debts and be the one taking care of his needs. I don't know when taking care of your ex-girlfriend has become an investment. Josh guilt-tripped me into giving him money because he took care of me when we were still together. I was foolish then, but I have learnt my lesson. I wish I could apologize to Pete with the way I embarrassed him, but after I confronted him about him making me lose my job, I felt more guilty than I was. I should have used that opportunity to apologize to him, but no, I didn't, and now I dare not show my face at his home any longer. It's all in the past now, but the guilt keeps taking a toll on me.